So why are we so sure that the structural reform agenda, as advertised, will have the effects that we hope? So if it doesn't, the way we're going to get out of this is basically through the macroeconomic counterpart, which is Donald Rumsfeld. That's the bit where you're meant to go, what the fuck? No? Okay, remember him? No, you're all too young. Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense during the time when America decided to invade enemy of the month number 17, who at that point was called Iraq. And he said when he wasn't getting the support that he needed from France, boo, hiss, that there was an old Europe and a new Europe, and he was interested in the new Europe, not the old Europe. Well, you know what? He's right, but not about war. He's right about exports. So here's a funny little factoid. Last quarter, the Eurozone as a whole ran a trade surplus against the rest of the world. Means that as a whole, the Eurozone is exporting more than it's importing. But look at those numbers. 26.4 billion, but 24 billion of that comes out of Germany. Now, Germany's 30% of the Eurozone, but they're not 3 times more efficient than everybody else. So how can Germany possibly be 90% of the variance? Well, the answer is this. Have a look at the supply chain. So have a look at the Czech Republic. 1/3 of the Czech Republic's exports go straight into Germany. 1/3 of that third is one category of exports: vehicle parts and body part supplies for the auto complex. Run through all of those countries. That's the new supply chain for the German auto complex that sells me diesels that lie to me. But they're very good cars and everybody buys them. So these guys are going to be great off this system because they never had big welfare states. They're not Sweden. They're post-communist societies that implicitly trust markets and distrust the state. And basically they have a lot of skilled, relatively young labor that's mobile, and investment rates are very, very high there because they don't have trade union protections and all the stuff that you've got here in France. And they're making money hand over fist. So as far as they're concerned, everything's fine. Now, remember the Greek crisis in the summer? Who were the first countries out to tell the Greeks that they were worth nothing? There's your list. Now, turn the other side round on this one. Let's imagine that you've got a line you can draw from Finland down to Alto Adige, out to Romania, back up through Austria, through Poland, and that's export-led Europe. It's running a surplus against the rest of the world. What does France do? What does Italy do? You see, they're very different types of capitalism. These are large consumption-led economies. They're not export-led demand economies. So imagine you've signed something called the Fiscal Compact that says that you've got to run a balanced budget, and one part of the currency zone is running an export surplus against the rest of the world. Homework assignment for your international monetary economics class. Go through the identities in the national account and figure out what's got to happen. They've got to run a contractionary policy domestically to offset the surplus. So what you're basically saying is France is going to have to run a near permanent austerity budget the more that Germany and Eastern Europe exports to the rest of the world. Ouch. That doesn't sound like a solution to me. I've got some charts I won't bore you with because they look ugly, but basically what they show is for the Czech Republic and Hungary, these guys have rebuilt their capital stock, they're exporting, the Germans are importing their stuff and it's going out into the rest of the world. So what does all this mean? Eastern Europe is to run chronic deficits, now they're all running surpluses. They've integrated into the German supply chain, they've rebuilt their capital stocks, and that's now active. So the key question is this secular or structural? We've seen this story before. Have you ever heard of the East Asian financial crisis? All those countries ran deficits, chronic capital importers. And then they went bang in 1997 and they said, we are never going to go back to the IMF, we're going to build up gigantic surpluses to make sure we don't have to. And they did. And now they run structural surpluses against the rest of the world. And now we're trying the same trick. Oops. Because that can only work if somebody's importing. Now, if 2/3 of the world economy is exporting and 1/3 is importing, what's that 1/3 called? The United States of America. So unless you guys are willing to basically be dollar long infinity and intermediate American short-term and long-term paper forever, which is the best deal we could ever hope for in the United States. Because ultimately what it means is you're selling me BMWs and I'm giving you bits of paper yielding 1%. That's the deal you're setting ourselves up for. Then this is inherently unstable. Second one, as I said, who can play this game? France can't play this game. Doesn't work. It's not because you're bad, it's because you're a different variety of capitalism. The regulation school guys in France nailed this 40 years ago. There are different regimes of accumulation, different institutional varieties of capitalism, and it matters. If you're an export-led economy, you can play the German game. If you're not, you can't. You can try and turn yourself into one, but there'll be blood on the streets before that happens. Third one, bond market effects. Basically, if you have this world in which you have near deflation everywhere, and everybody's trying to run an export surplus and is over-saving, that surplus of saving over investment's got to show up in long bond rates. So the Fed can do what it wants on the short end of the curve, but the long run is low forever. If you've got substitutable low assets and negative real rates, it's very, very hard to get growth going, even if you're running an export surplus. And the last one is fragility. What happens if people stop buying your stuff? You got a problem.